welcome to the Get Over Yourself podcast. This is author and athlete Brad Kearns discovering ways to be healthy, fit, and happy in hectic, high-stress modern life. So let's slow down and take a deep breath, take a cold plunge, and expertly balance that competitive intensity with an appreciation of the journey. That's the theme of the show. Here we go.
Whenever I explain this to people, I like to kind of take a step back and look at it more from this ancestral perspective. And the best way to explain it is that if you think about the way that our ancestors lived their lives, at night they would go into a cave or a mud hut or some kind of stone structure, and they're largely blocked from any of the cosmic radiation that's coming down because they're in that type of structure. I kind of have a different opinion than a lot of people that are out there because I've actually measured the frequencies that they're planning to use for 5G, the millimeter waves, and I've tested it in places where they actually have it live. There really can't be any dispute on the biological or the physiological mechanism by which they're causing damage, because the study itself that Dr. Martin Pall cites is one where they had people on calcium channel blockers. One group was on calcium channel blockers, the other group wasn't, and they were exposed to the same amount of EMF, and the people that were on the calcium channel blockers didn't experience any of the symptoms that the people that were not on the calcium channel blockers had.
This is Brad. I want to tell you about my life-changing acquisition of a personal home-use sauna. I have a 6x6 barrel sauna in my backyard, ready-made heat therapy, a fabulous unit from Almost Heaven. Check out their website. You can very affordably order your own sauna for installation in your backyard or garage and have a sauna experience, the fabulous health benefits accruing from exposure to hot temperatures. Get that sweat going. These are beautiful traditional dry barrel saunas where you splash the water on the rocks, go in there and relax. It's become a social centerpiece at my home. People traveling from far and wide to come check out the barrel sauna, turn the dial or set the timer and walk in to 200 degrees in the Caribbean seas. For some reason, people like to come to the sauna more than my cold tub. Go figure. Check out almostheaven.com and their beautiful natural wood designs, and pretty soon, surprisingly affordable, you will be in the home sauna business. Shielded Healing. Doesn't it sound like a song title? It's the title of this incredible company run by Brian Hoyer, my guest on the podcast. What a great show. You are going to learn all about electromagnetic fields and the dangers of modern times and high-tech modern life messing with our cellular function thanks to all this electricity everywhere, especially Wi-Fi, cellular devices, smart meters on the side of your home, and the possibility of, quote, dirty electricity in your home environment. The show gets a little sciencey, a little complex, and some of the terminology might escape you, but don't worry, because Brian does a great job explaining everything and bringing it back to practical tips. You gotta hang in till the finish of the show, where we have our top 10 list of things you can do right away, immediately, to mitigate the EMF exposure in your home environment. And I think the most fascinating takeaway here is when Brian talks about the difference between daytime exposure and nighttime exposure to EMF. So in the daytime, we're hitting it hard, we're working the cell phones, we're doing deals, we're in this heightened energy, sympathetic nervous system function state because we're living a hectic, busy, productive day. Then at nighttime, per ancestral example, that's when our body is trying to relax and unwind. And that is when we're most vulnerable to EMF because it messes with our cellular function, promotes free radical production, and spikes stress hormones. So when we lay our head down on the pillow to sleep after our busy, productive day, that's when we really want to make a great effort to protect ourselves from EMF, especially in the sanctuary that is the bedroom. So when you get to the end and listen to this top 10 list, I am all over it. As soon as I finished the podcast, I jumped onto Amazon, bought my remote control unplugging devices and a couple other things, some of the supplements he recommended. It's the least you could do is make for a peaceful evening environment, okay? So enjoy this great show with Brian Hoyer from shieldedhealing.com. Brian Hoyer, I gotcha. Shielded Healing. What a wonderful company name. Let's hear all about it, man.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me. I've heard some great things about your show, and I know we have a mutual friend, Brian Johnson.
The Liver King. And
the Liver King, yes.
We are gonna get into that, because when I visited that guy's house, oh man, I mean, you think you're living the ancestral dream, but watch out when you walk through that door. No cell phones allowed, no Wi-Fi. There's 100-foot Ethernet cords dangling all over the place if you want to go work outside or work here or work there. They got you all set up. The beautiful lighting and the soft lighting throughout the house. So I guess this is your game, where you're going to go do consultations and train other people. And I've heard you a little bit, and I can't wait to introduce our listeners to this seemingly a burgeoning health topic. Like, it seems like this stuff is getting a lot of attention finally.
Yeah, I think the new 5G networks has got even some mainstream people wondering, hey, why do we need these really fast speeds? And they like, everything is already really, really fast. Even some of my tech friends, they're like, we don't need all this stuff to be connected. I mean, it's kind of cool to be able to do some of the things that they say that 5G is going to bring, but ultimately, I think people are more concerned with the transmitters being everywhere now. So it's bringing a lot of attention to something that's been largely ignored for quite a long time, actually.
So just to jump into that one real quick, we were familiar with the old cell phones had 3G, and then they had 4G, and you have the little icon up in the corner of your screen when you're talking, identifying that you're on a 4G network, that you're hitting a cell tower, and the reception kind of sucks over here, and then it gets better when you turn the corner on your familiar country road or wherever you are. And so we know that these towers exist, and that you have to be pretty close to a tower. You don't want to live under one. So I think we have this general idea. But now with this 5G, as it's explained to me, they're kind of like taking over the planet and frying our brains in a sense.
Yeah, well, they're planning on opening up some bandwidths that are higher frequency, and they don't travel as well through solid objects, and so they need more transmitters in order to achieve the coverage. And there's other companies like T-Mobile who are going a different route, and they're actually going with a lower frequency, 600 megahertz, so they can actually broadcast it further and penetrate through everything and basically get everywhere. So there's no gap in the connection or anything. And I remember when I first got a cell phone when I was 18 years old. It was back in about the year 2002, and there was places I could go where I would have to be roaming, or there wouldn't be any cell phone reception. But it's not really like that now. Pretty much everywhere you go, you're exposed to something. You always have reception. There's very few places in the United States and probably all over the world, really, where you don't have some kind of connection anymore.
So with the strategically placed cell towers that we've been using for many years, what is going on with these 5G transmitters? They're getting installed apparently on the top of every light post or everywhere you turn, these little guys that are emitting a signal. And let's talk about the effect on the human body from maybe talk about the cell tower and living in proximity to that and the health danger there, and then in comparison to what we're facing when we go into this new network.
Yeah, well, I kind of have a different opinion than a lot of people that are out there, because I've actually measured the frequencies that they're planning to use for 5G, the millimeter waves, and I've tested it in places where they actually have it live. And the idea, with 3G and 4G, we have phones that are operating at 900 megahertz all the way up to like 2 gigahertz or 2,000 megahertz, and those frequencies are already damaging in and of themselves. And then most of us in our own homes, we have Wi-Fi signals that are 2.4 gigahertz, and so that's already a higher frequency than what our cell phones are operating at. And high or low, it doesn't mean it's worse or better. It just is the type of frequency, how close together the wavelengths are. And then also our Wi-Fi routers have 5 gigahertz. And if you notice, when you're connected to a 5 gigahertz or a 5G Wi-Fi network, it doesn't go as far as the 2.4 gigahertz. So that
notice, man. Now you're solving all these puzzling things that happen around the house. Okay, so is 5G faster? I mean, 5 gigahertz faster than 2.4? Is that why they're putting it on there? But it doesn't go as far.
Yeah, so 5 gigahertz is faster than the 2.4 gigahertz, but it can't travel through the walls as easily. And so the 5 gigahertz or 5G, it doesn't have anything to do with the 5G network that they're installing everywhere. It's kind of more, I kind of bring that up to just show an example of how when you have a higher frequency, it doesn't travel as easily through walls and things like that. And so that's why with the 5G networks, they're planning to raise the frequencies to higher frequencies so that they can get more bandwidth, higher speeds and everything. But they're going to have to put these towers more often, like around the neighborhood and things like that. And they're going to be closer to our houses. But they're still going to be using these 4G and 3G networks that penetrate, further that can actually penetrate pretty easily through your walls and even tinted glass and things like that. So these frequencies, no matter what they are, they've been shown in many, many studies, hundreds, maybe thousands of studies have shown that they do cause cellular damage and DNA damage, and also, all kinds of different types of symptoms. Ringing in the ears can cause a permeable blood-brain barrier, leaky gut. There's a multitude of issues, and it's all by this one mechanism, or actually the one mechanism that's the most well-known is through these voltage-gated calcium ion channels. And so there's a Dr. Martin Paul from Washington State University, and his research, he kind of really brought that to the forefront. And basically what they found was that these various different types of frequencies, and just not just wireless frequencies, it's also electric fields and magnetic fields, they all have this biological mechanism where when the cells in your body sense a voltage shift, the voltage-gated calcium channels actually open up and let calcium flood into the cell. And what happens with that is that there's this effect with calcium entering into the cell and nitric oxide. It creates peroxynitrite, which is a free radical, and it's like a potent oxidative stressor. And so that causes inflammation and leads to all sorts of oxidative damage in different parts of the body. And when that happens, it can lead to a multitude of symptoms. It's not just any one thing, and that's why it's so pernicious and kind of hard to be like, well, when you're exposed to this, it causes this, because it can cause an overall higher amount of inflammation in the body, and it could lead to any number of symptoms that a person would experience. And that's kind of what's been happening ever since we've had electricity, widespread. Just the electricity from the wiring in the walls is we've had this phenomena happening, and it's just exponentially increased as we've added more technology and different types of frequencies. It's all operating at least on this mechanism, if not on other mechanisms in our biology. So it's something that's widespread. We're all being exposed to it. There are ways to block it, and it's definitely something that's not ancestral. Like, our bodies are not used to these sorts of energetic stressors.
Now, you're mentioning hundreds, if not thousands, of studies. Is any of this in dispute in the scientific community, such as climate change is, 99.99% of Earth scientists believe that climate change is a real phenomena. What about in this field? Can you find someone who will negate this entire concept that has credibility, or are we kind of in agreement that we have an issue here?
Well, you'll definitely find people that dispute that it's not an issue, but these people are behind on the research. There really can't be any dispute on the biological or the physiological mechanism by which they're causing damage, because the study itself that Dr. Martin Pall cites is one where they had people on calcium channel blockers. One group was on calcium channel blockers, the other group wasn't, and they were exposed to the same amount of EMF. And the people that were on the calcium channel blockers didn't experience any of the symptoms that the people that were not on the calcium channel blockers had. So one group, they both had the same exposure. One group was on the calcium channel blockers. When you block those calcium channels, they don't have any symptoms. And the people that didn't have anything, they were experiencing all these different symptoms. And so it just shows by default that these exposures cause these symptoms, and they were able to measure that. So the fact that it's non-ionizing, non-thermal damage that's happening, that's something that really can't be disputed anymore. What it was in science before was many conventional scientists and people from the wireless industry obviously have special interest in this. They would say that it's only the ionizing type of radiation that can damage you. It's only like the nuclear radiation, gamma, and alpha, and all these different types of, and cosmic radiation. Those things can cause enough damage to damage your DNA and cause an atom to be released, and from the nucleus of a cell or whatever. And that's not really what we're talking about here when we're talking about the mechanism of damage with this non-ionizing radiation. We're talking about physiological changes in the body due to an exposure. Just like when you have voltage come onto your body, it causes your muscles to contract. You have those little electrodes that you can hook up to your body. I'm sure you've done this. You're an athlete. You put electrodes on your body, and it causes this involuntary muscle contraction when you have voltage going through your muscles. And so that causes a physiological response in the body where your muscles are contracting, and when your muscles contract, you're using calcium, and then when they relax, you're using up your magnesium stores. Well, what we've done in our modern world is we've surrounded ourselves with this electricity, and we've got these micro pulsations happening all night long, and we're never getting the rest and restorative sleep that we need every single night because we're under this constant stress. And when you're under that stress, your cortisol goes up, it edges up, and then that makes your melatonin go down. So you never have quite as much melatonin as you normally would in an environment that's completely free of these stressors than you do if you constantly have these pulsations from the electricity, from magnetic fields, from the wireless that's coming in, and it's affecting every single cell in your body on a different level.
Well, that was one of the biggest things I wanted to ask you. I heard you make this assertion that it's vastly more damaging at nighttime when we're trying to rest than it is when we're running around during a busy day, walking around with our cell phone and our Apple AirPods that go in your ear and emit a Bluetooth. You're carrying these things around for hours. So can you describe the compare and contrast between daytime exposure to the assorted EMF contributors versus when you lay your head down to your pillow to get a wonderful, peaceful night's sleep?
Yeah, well, whenever I explain this to people, I like to kind of take a step back and look at it more from this ancestral perspective. And the best way to explain it is that if you think about the way that our ancestors lived their lives, at night they would go into a cave or a mud hut or some kind of stone structure, and they're largely blocked from any of the cosmic radiation that's coming down because they're in that type of structure. And they already didn't have any of the exposures, modern exposures that we had today. But then when they come out of their cave or their mud hut or whatever, their primal habitat, or shelter, they would come out and they would come into the sun during the daytime. And the sun has UV radiation, it has cosmic radiation, and there's infrared, and there's all this stimulation, this energetic stimulation that you're getting during the daytime. And so your body is actually built to be able to handle a certain amount of energetic stress, and those are electromagnetic waves during the day, and it's actually adapted to use infrared light for energy to produce ATP. We know that now from the work of people like Dr. Alexander Wunsch and John Ott and some of these other people. And then we use UVB radiation to produce vitamin D. So there's a certain amount of radiation that you can handle during the day, and our body actually uses a lot of it for different metabolic processes. What we don't use is we don't use any of the wireless frequencies. We don't use any of the electric field frequencies. The type of frequencies that we get from the Earth are DC. They're direct current coming in one direction. But now all the electricity that we have in our houses is pulsed current. And it's a digital modulated frequency at 60 hertz. And then the same thing with the cell phone towers. They're all pulsed frequencies that are wireless. So during the day, you're able to handle even more of these kinds of stressors better than at night. Because at night, your body is meant to be kind of in its own frequency. You're cocooned in this shelter, hopefully, and you are in your own frequency, and that's the time that the body chooses to heal innately. Your innate intelligence does all of the detoxification at night. You do the repair at night. You're restoring all of your minerals, and you're rebuilding tissues, and you're detoxing your brain and all of your lymphatics. All of that stuff is happening at night. And so if we, to halt that process, if your body perceives any stressor, it halts any detoxification or repair process. And that's because, your body is supposed to be in this parasympathetic state, a rest and digest state at night. And digestion's another time when you really need to be free of these stressors so you can digest the food that you're eating. And then also when you're detoxifying. If you're doing any kind of detox protocol, you can't be in an emotionally stressed state. You can't be in a physically stressed state. Otherwise, your body's not going to prioritize the detox. It's going to prioritize dealing with the stressor over the detox, over the rebuilding and repairing, because you're supposed to be running away from this lion of a stressor right now in the moment. And so I think that's where, a lot of people that I talk to, they're worried about their cell phone, their Wi-Fi, where they're sitting during the day, and all of these daytime exposures. And that's fine. I think we should be reducing those as much as possible too, because they're not natural. But they always forget that, man, the nighttime, that's when you can actually control it. You don't need to be connected to all this stuff. You don't need to have that in your bedroom. And we can actually recreate this ancestral healing environment in your bedroom so you have 8 hours of this healing therapy that'll wake up all these dormant healing responses in your body. And that is where it's at. That's where people need to start. We can't think of that as an afterthought. That's 8 hours every day where you don't need that. And you can actually start there. And people see really amazing results when they do that.
Wow, that's really wonderfully put and so exciting because it's doable and sustainable for the average person who, I have to admit, these days is getting overwhelmed, it seems, with all the dietary advice. And I talk to my friends, real people that have real jobs. They aren't in the health industry, living and breathing this stuff like we do every single day. There's a tremendous amount of frustration with diet. There's a tremendous amount of frustration even with the exercise protocols that are being bandied about and getting people overstressed and burnt out and frustrated. And now to even tiptoe into the area to say, hey, that cell phone that is in your pocket all day while you're doing deals, that's really bad for your health. And they're pretty much like, leave me alone, man. I'm just trying to kick sugar right now. So the idea that we can focus on the nighttime and get vast majority of the benefits, wow, that's exciting to me. I think I can handle this, man. What do we do? What's our step-by-step intervention here if we're going to do one over the podcast network?
Yeah, well, basically, first step is to get a professional into the house to measure these things. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a professional, but I've done many assessments of houses, and there's so many different things that can be going on, different rabbit trails that you can go on to fix some issues. I mean, we test for wiring issues in the house, and those will need to be fixed by an electrician, and many of the electricians don't know how to fix those because they don't see them as wiring issues necessarily.
This is fine. See the switch? It turns on. You're good. Okay, let's check the next room.
Yeah, exactly. So but when you start to show them, there's actually a book out there that you should get if you're concerned about this. It's called Building, Wiring, and Grounding. I forget the exact title. It's kind of a boring title, but the author's name is Carl Riley, Carl with a K. And he has all of the National Electric Code violations that cause a lot of the magnetic field issues that are the wiring errors that we see when we do these tests in people's houses. And so he kind of tells you step by step how to fix those and what they are and the common mistakes that electricians make that create large magnetic fields. And basically what that boils down to is, in any home you have in any outlet, just think about an outlet. There's 3 prongs, right? Well, the 2 top prongs, there's the hot and the neutral. And so those 2 wires are supposed to go throughout the house in your Romex, and they're supposed to be together all the way from the beginning of your circuit box through all your appliances and everything and right back. And it does that through the loop, just through the Romex. The hot's supposed to be right next to the neutral that whole time. Well, what some people do is they'll connect the neutral wire in another box to another circuit, and that causes the current to go in a different direction, and it's no longer together. When they're not together, they don't cancel each other out.
Explain how that could happen. Are you talking about splicing into the Romex and piggybacking or something?
Yeah, sometimes they'll piggyback something off of it, but mostly it's when they go into a junction box and then they have a bunch of neutral wires together in the box. That's one way. Or they can connect the ground to the neutral or the neutral to the ground. There's different ways that this can happen. And really, if you're curious about this, you should just get the book. He's got lots of really good illustrations in there. But essentially what's going on is the neutral wire at some point is being connected somewhere where it's going in a different direction, and it's no longer going back the same way that it came. And so when that happens, there's more current going out than going back, and so it creates this magnetic field because the current is no longer canceling out the other wire that has the same amount of current going through it.
It sounds like this is a code violation. Like it's a poor job in the first place. Instead of a routine, skilled electrician's going to do like you describe at the outset.
Yeah, so some electricians are out there making this mistake all the time.
Oh.
And others they'll and all the lights will still work, but the reason it's a National Electric Code violation is because if you turn off one circuit and then there's another circuit that's connected to the neutral, that circuit you turn off could still have a hot neutral wire on it. And so that's a problem in and of itself from a safety standpoint. So this is just one of the things that we are testing for and we're looking for when we're on these assessments. And then there's also the issue of ground current and dirty electricity. And then we're looking at the artificial lighting in the house and the bulbs and seeing which bulbs you need to replace, which ones you can keep. And then also anything that's emitting in your house. I have like 5 different radio frequency wireless meters that I use when I go in on an assessment because of the different ways that we have to test these things and the different meters that pick up different types of stressors in the house. So that's really the first step, is to get this assessment done, and then you get a full protocol of what needs to be done for your house, your sleeping area, things that we can reduce in the daytime areas that are the best bang for your buck and that aren't going to really affect your everyday life. And I really like to work with people on, okay, how do we create this healing space in your bedroom, but then also how can we reduce as much as we can that's not going to disrupt your life or the life of the person in the house that's skeptical of all this. They want nothing to do with it and they love their technology, yeah, let's find some kind of common ground here, because most people can agree, like, okay, I have this stuff during the day, I don't need it at night. I might just, there's a few people I've had where they just are on call, and so they want to be able to, answer their cell phone or a text message for emergency reasons at night. And there's solutions for that too. We have this shielding fabric that you can put over the window. You can put your phone behind that if you really need to be on call. And it's behind the shielded curtain, so you're still going to get reception coming into that, but you're more protected than you would be otherwise if you didn't have that in place. And so there's this shielding fabric we put over the windows. There's a special conductive shielding paint that you can actually paint all of your walls with it and ground it so that the electricity can't come from behind the walls onto your body. And we want to get that body voltage all the way down to zero, just like you would in nature. And then when you have this conductive paint on the walls and the ceiling, and we have some solutions for the floor as well, you're basically wrapping yourself in this earth energy, blocking all the pulsating currents from the walls, and it's also reflecting away all the wireless from the cell phone towers and the radio towers and television towers. And that helps to create this more ancestral sleep environment where you're not getting all these pulsations coming onto your cells, and your body's actually able to be like, finally, I can rest. And we've seen people get off of medications overnight, stop night sweats overnight, ringing in the ears goes away overnight. It's pretty amazing the things that the body actually, it doesn't need like we've reduced people's supplement protocols by half or more just by them going into the shielded room for just a few nights. And if you could just get that every single night, then you're going to be way better off for your health down the road, because it's exponential what happens when your body can actually get into that deep restorative detox state every single night.
Oh, the book you mentioned, you said it was a boring title. I think you sold it short, because the title's Tracing EMFs in Building Wiring and Grounding.
Yeah,
Carl
that's
Riley.
it.
No subtitle, and the cover is one of the most basic, routine, like electrical drawings. No pizzazz at all, so you know it's a good book. So that's really a great plug there for the book. And I wonder if you can't really tell this stuff's happening to you in real time. We're just making an assumption that the modern world and all the electricity is doing damage, and we have great science to prove it. But we wake up and go about our day, and we wonder, how important this is to take on. Are you going to get some really strong feedback, such as a more deep sleep at night and waking up feeling more refreshed? Are your clients reporting things like that?
Oh yeah, definitely. That's I've never had somebody who has shielded their room who hasn't reported that, in fact. And we're actually also quantifying it with things like the Aura Ring. I've had many clients who have an Aura Ring, and one of them is actually I have a video on my website and a little interview I did with Dr. Ben Lynch after shielding one of his houses, and he reported on his Aura Ring like he gets deep sleep like vastly more when he's at home in a shielded room and after he shielded his room than before. And I, hearing his story about that made me go get an Aura Ring and start to test it for myself. So when I go on the road, my deep sleep goes like, kerplunk basically. And then when I come back home, it goes back up, and the REM even goes up a little bit too. So, we know that the REM is like your brain resetting and everything, and the deep sleep is like supposed to be ultra restorative type of sleep. So we have the anecdotal reports from people, but then we also have some hard science with this new technology with the Aura Ring that we can actually track it. And the nice thing, the reason I like the Aura Ring better than a lot of the other fitness trackers is because it has an airplane mode, so you can actually, you're not getting exposed to wireless when you're wearing the Aura Ring. It's using an infrared technology to get your pulse and your heart rate variability and track your sleep cycles and that sort of thing. And so we're recommending that to a lot of people who want to quantify the improvement in symptoms that they're having.
So I guess if we're not going to get our consultant in tomorrow and we want to get out of crisis mode immediately, and then think about getting further and further interested in this, and who knows, maybe repainting the room. Do they have like a wonderful Kelly Moore color palette of grounding paint, or are we choosing between black, brown, and and green, or is it kind of a commercially available thing that's viable to do with the paint?
Yeah, well, it only comes in one color, and it's black. But you can paint over it whatever color you want.
Right. So you're going to do a grounding paint job as like a primer, and then wow, when you're painting over black, I guess you have to use a bunch of coats of pink or mauve or whatever you want.
Yeah, there's some ways
white. You have to go black, and then you have to go primer white, and then go back to the chosen color.
Yep. Yeah, and we do 2 layers of the black. And then altogether, I think I recommend up to 6 coats of paint, including the shielding paint, when we're doing these jobs. And there's a specific way that we, for each room, it's a little bit different on what we'll recommend on how to do the painting. So, and that's the thing that's important, is how to do the painting is just as important as using the best paint. And because you could have the best paint, and if there's holes in your shielding, or you haven't thought about how to apply it in the best way, then you can have some problems. So, if people are just starting out and they really want to do something right now, some of the easy things you can do is you can start unplugging things in your room from the walls, because one of the major things that we test for is body voltage. And that's when we're testing the amount of voltage that's going through your body. And so if you have things plugged into the wall right near your bed, a lot of people have power strips. They're plugging their cell phone in there. They're plugging a fan in there. And, all of these different things, and lamps and everything. And all that voltage is right around your bed. And then some people have a metal bed frame, and so that accelerates the pathway, and amplifies the pathway where the electricity can come to the body. So often the first steps we'll recommend to people is get rid of your metal bed frame, get an all wood bed frame, get the springs out of your mattress and your box springs. They have these wooden bed foundations. There's non-toxic foam mattresses and latex and wool mattresses that you can get now. There's so many options for metal-free mattresses. So those are some of the main things. And then if you need a lamp plugged in, there's these little remote plugs that you can get from Amazon, where you plug it into the wall, and then you can plug your lamp into that, and then it has a little remote, and you can just turn off the power to the cord with the push of a button. And so we'll often recommend that for the person's lamps and their Wi-Fi router they can turn off, their Apple TV they can turn off, and their smart TV. Like, basically it has 5 or 6 buttons on one remote, and you can just flip all that stuff off at night, and then in the morning when you want to get up, you can turn it all back on if you want to.
And we're really focusing on the bedroom here. So if we have a bunch of junk down the hall, down the stairs, we're not so concerned with that as our immediate environment. Or are we talking about turning off the Wi-Fi throughout the house at night as a recommendation?
Yeah, so any of the wireless you want to turn off at night, especially if you're not using it, just as a general recommendation, because that's going to be closer to your body. It's something you can control, so why not just reduce that one stressor or eliminate that stressor right away? But you don't have to unplug everything in the house. With the electric fields, it's mainly what's within about 10 or 12 feet of you where you need to unplug it. And in a shielded room, you don't need to worry as much about that, as long as you can get things unplugged at night when you're in the shielded room. Because even in an unshielded room, you have the Romex behind the walls that's still going to be emanating electric fields. So you could have everything unplugged and you're still got a high body voltage, because it's basically like there's extension cords plugged in that are wrapped around all the walls of your room, under the floor, and over the ceiling. I always explain it to people like, our modern sleep situation right now is like you pitched a tent out in the middle of nature, and then you plugged in an extension cord and wrapped it around your tent and over the top of your tent and under your tent. it's that screams unnatural and not something that seems logical to do. But that's essentially what we've done in all of our homes.
So if I'm thinking of my naysayer listeners that like to give me grief about, hey, what is this carnivore? That's ridiculous that you shouldn't eat vegetables. And now they're going to listen to you and wonder, oh my gosh, come on. He's saying unplug everything every night, and you're going to disrupt my life by telling me to put my cell phone away from arm's reach and all that. But just to bring it back a little bit and touch on the health risks that you mentioned briefly. So what we're talking about here is this environment with these stimulators that open up our calcium channels. We're getting a slight stress response. We're getting a little bit of that cortisol spike and consequent melatonin drop. So we're getting a slightly crappy night of sleep, which everyone can refer to when they go to a motel or an unfamiliar environment and they wake up and it just wasn't quite right. And that's kind of where we're at with our bedroom, our precious bedroom, where we spend a third of our life.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the reason that a lot of people don't sleep as well when they're not at home is because your body is like so adapted to rhythms in your life. And so if you have similar exposure every single night and then something all of a sudden changes, your body's not ready for that. And the problem that we have right now is that with the way that these frequencies operate, they're pulsating and they're erratic. And you can actually hear this when you use a meter. And I'm going to turn on one of my meters so you can kind of hear these frequencies.
This is only a test.
You can kind of hear how the high screeching sound, that's the cell phone towers. And then there's some... It just sounds horrible. If we could hear these things, we would not be using the technology at all, but or using it very sparingly. But the thing is these frequencies are so sporadic. The screeching sound is the cell phone towers. They're pulsating. You'll hear like a click, 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 click. That's like a Wi-Fi or a Bluetooth signal. And these things are so sporadic and pulsating that there's nothing natural about it. And so when you are in that type of environment, your body can never really adapt to it. And then there's, a lot of people that have these smart meters on the sides of their houses. Those are the electrical meter that has an actual RF pulse. Those things are pulsing sometimes 5 or 6 times a minute. And some people have them right on the outside of their bedroom. And there's actually a video online of this guy. His last name is Woodward. And they show him hooked up to an EKG machine, and then they have an RF meter that's hooked up to a charting device, and you can see immediately when there's the pulse of the radio frequency on the smart meter, he has a heart arrhythmia. And so it's causing action in the heart, a heart arrhythmia, when this pulsation happened. And so for a lot of people, they'll have panic attacks at night. And panic attacks are associated with irregular heartbeats. And I'm kind of thinking that, okay, we have all these smart meters being installed on these neighborhoods everywhere. Sometimes people will move into a house, or all of a sudden they start to get these symptoms. This is stuff that's, definitely affecting the body in different ways. And why not just block it out at night? That would be the way that I would sell it to people. Why not just block it out at night, see how you feel? And it, for many people, it has a huge impact on sleep. It's not just a small impact on the melatonin or things like that. Sometimes it's a very significant impact. And if you can just get that 8 hours of healing therapy every single night, you don't have to make time for that. You're going to bed anyway. You might as well just have it be a healing and restful environment where you're free of these stressors, more like your ancestors would have been. And that's kind of it, man. That's the ticket to health, in my opinion, as far as this goes. And there's a more holistic picture to this whole thing. Obviously what you put into your body needs to be wholesome, but I always tell people it's also what you put your body into needs to be wholesome.
So the smart meter, I had a show with Tanya Teschka, and she was strongly critical of those, and was talking about people in where she was living at the time in Switzerland vandalizing their smart meter like 2 times, and on the 3rd time they would come and switch it out to a lower tech device. Is this still a possibility today where we can raise hell and say, hey, I don't want this high-tech smart meter that's pulsing electricity. I want the old-school spinning wheel that you see on the in the window on the side of your house at the power box?
Yeah, you can still do that. There's a lot of states that allow you to opt out. There's only a few that won't allow you to opt out, and they always, not always, I guess sometimes they'll give you a hard time about it. But for the most part, there is an opt-out in most states. I think Pennsylvania is one of the few that doesn't have an opt-out right now. They'll kind of force it on you. And
what is the smart meter doing, and what's the difference between the old technology?
Well, the power company will tell you one story, and then like in actuality, it's something else. They'll even tell you that it's not a smart meter they're installing. I actually was at someone's house in Seattle just like a few tours ago, and like just a few months ago, really, and the guy came to install the smart meter while I was doing the EMF assessment at the person's house.
Hi, my name's Brian. What's yours? What are you doing here? Oh.
So he knocked on the door, and he asked the homeowner if we could turn the power off so he could install the meter, and so she asked me, she's like, hey, he needs to turn the power off to install this. I was like, oh, what's he installing? And then I found out it was the smart meter, and I said, well, is this right now she has an analog meter on there. I already looked at it, I think, and he's like, oh yeah, we're just replacing it. It's not a smart meter. It's just an upgrade, and it and he said, you already have a smart meter. He told her that to her face, and I already knew it wasn't because I looked at it, and then I went back and I double checked. I was like, am I going crazy or something? But they'll just lie to you and tell you that it's something else than what it is, and basically what it is they're using these to connect everybody's houses together so that you can communicate like the energy usage. That's what they're saying. But there's even some reports that say that they're admitting now that they're using it to sell some of the information to companies about when people will run their washer and dryer, when they're home, when they do run their AC, like basically a way to monitor and get data on people's energy consumption. So some people would say that it's a form of surveillance.
Ooh, that's good. It'll attract even the people who aren't health conscious. What? They're spying on me? Get rid of that thing.
Yeah.
And so the pulsing of I guess it's the data acquisition by the smart meter and the pulsing of the electricity to do so is where the problem lies versus the old meters that were just kind of wired into the house and not doing this objectionable new technology.
Yeah, well, the two issues with the smart meters is there's the pulsation that's happening. That's the radio frequency wireless pulse.
The heart attacks. Oh, excuse me, the pulsation of the radio frequency, right.
Yeah. And then there's also the fact that it creates dirty electricity that goes onto your wiring, and that's from the switching on and off all the time.
And what's dirty electricity?
Dirty electricity is higher frequency transients that are riding on the 60 hertz. So the 60 hertz is what your electricity is. The higher frequency transients are 180 hertz all the way to the kilohertz range, almost like AM radio range. And so in between those, it's usually below 2 kilohertz, is the vast amount of the dirty electricity that's created. But then there's some, like solar panels create as much as 80 kilohertz to 140 kilohertz. And that can go on to your electrical wiring as well. And there's lots of studies that show those vastly increase your blood sugar.
The solar panels?
Yeah, just the dirty electricity.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
but you're saying solar panels are a risk factor for dirty electricity?
Yes, definitely.
Oh, mercy. All our clean living people. It's like when you hear that the the manufacturing of the Toyota Prius takes more carbon energy than than a car that burns gas for 10 years. Oh man, I thought I was being good to the planet. Solar panels. Do we have a remedy for solar panels? Can you do some modifications to reduce that offense?
Yeah, as far as health goes, yes, and also you can make your house even more energy efficient by filtering the dirty electricity that your solar panels create. So there's this box that you can actually install at your circuit panel that helps to filter the dirty electricity before it gets into the house from the solar panels, and it makes your electricity actually run more efficiently. So anything with a motor will run more efficiently, and a lot of people report their costs going down from anywhere from 5 to 12% in their electric bill after they install this super power perfect box is what it's called. And so I've been recommending those to almost everybody that we do assessments for, even people, it's on my website, so we will sell it to anybody. But then there's also tips on how to install it that are very customized. And so we figured out some ways on how to test it and install it that we include from anybody who gets the product from us. But it's essentially what it's doing is it's filtering everything before it comes into your house, and that way it doesn't come onto your body. And I don't know if it's quantifiable, but you could say it's hundreds of times more damaging than even the 60 hertz itself, because it's got hundreds or thousands of other frequencies that are riding on the electricity that are actually penetrating deeper into your body, because the 60 hertz will go onto your skin and penetrate a little bit, and then through anything any surface that's conductive, like your eyes, your nose, sometimes your ears, your mouth, any cuts that you have. But the dirty electricity, because it's a wireless frequency, it'll ride on the 60 hertz, and then it will penetrate further into your body. And that's something that they've seen it increase your blood sugar, and they've done even some studies with some diabetics in relation to dirty electricity and exercise on treadmills, which produce a lot of dirty electricity.
Oh mercy! We're trying so hard to get our workouts in on these electrical devices. Get outside, people. I'll put in a plug for that. Get off those machines. We use machines all day long, then we go work out on machines.
Yeah, exactly.
There's another reason to get outside, get on the ground. Yeah. Are some people, are some study subjects more sensitive than others? Is there a range of responses to a high frequency bedroom or dirty electricity environment?
Yeah, so there's various ways to measure the dirty electricity, and what I've found with people is there's some people who would categorize themselves as electrosensitive, or they have microwave sickness. A lot of people in mainstream will immediately think of the show Better Call Saul, and the guy that's electrosensitive, and he's like, they kind of portray him as being this crazy guy or whatever. Well, I see a lot of people's houses, maybe a third of the people that schedule assessments with me are people that are like that have sensitivity to these frequencies, and it's actually real. And I've been able to measure it. They say something's coming from their laptop, and they don't know what it is. It's not voltage. It's not whatever this other thing is. Their Wi-Fi's off, all this stuff. But then I'll test the body current with this special meter that I have, and their body current will be extremely high. And Sam Milhelm, he wrote the book Dirty Electricity, and he discovered that you can use a specific type of meter, a fluke meter, a 287 or 289, and you can actually measure your body microamps. And there's a government study that he cites where it shows as 18 microamps of body current going through your body is carcinogenic. And I've measured as much as 300 microamps in a person's bed. And on average, we'll get, some people will be 0, but then there'll be people that are 5 microamps to 12, 20, 50, whatever. It can have a different range. But this is all related to dirty electricity that's coming on your ground system. And we're the only ones that I know of who's found a solution to this in the way that we recommend doing the shielding.
Speaking of that grounding, I know there's grounding sheets you can get for your bed, and then I heard Mercola recently say that you don't want to do any grounding because the environment we're in is so charged anyway that the grounding is simply going to connect you to a dirty earth. Where do you stand on those such matters, including plug-in devices like the wonderful chili pad that keeps your mattress temperature cool, and apparently, of course, is going to be using some electricity from time to time, but apparently safe. What is one to think?
Well, I agree with Dr. Mercola somewhat on that because you really don't know unless you test the area if it's a clean environment or not. And so if you're not testing it, you could use yourself as a test subject, I suppose, and see how you feel. But a lot of people would rather just find out what's going on before they expose themselves to that sort of thing. But I have some videos that I'm going to be coming out with that kind of clear up a lot of the controversy on this issue. And basically, yes, there are some areas where you can plug your grounding mat into the wall and it's fine. But there's just as many areas where you plug it into the wall and it's not fine. So it can bring dirty electricity to your body, but if your room is shielded, no matter where you're at, you can have a healthy environment and you can ground in a healthy way if you're shielded properly. And that's something that we've confirmed over and over again when we've done, like, taken somebody from the beginning to completion after discovering a big issue with the dirty ground or high radio frequencies or electric fields and that sort of thing in people's houses.
So let's talk about shielded healing and how you can facilitate this home inspection. You have a team of people that are covering certain areas, and we can go look on your website and see if we can arrange an appointment, maybe talk about the costs, how it works, and then the person gets a recommendation and where we go from there.
Yeah, so we basically cover all of the United States right now, and I have about 5 people on the team. We call them Shielded Healing Pros. So we have 5 pros in the field, including myself, and basically, like, we go wherever people need us. So if there's a certain number of people that you can round up together that's in your obscure area, even if you live in the middle of New Mexico, like on some farm or ranch or whatever, if you can round up 5 or so people, we could want an assessment. We can get somebody out there to do an assessment for you. I mean, I even have one guy on my team who is a truck driver, and so he goes across the country all year long, like multiple times, and he'll go through some of the most obscure areas, and sometimes we're able to get him to go off into Lubbock, Texas, or places that are just like you hardly ever would imagine yourself visiting there. So sorry if you have any Lubbock listeners, but it was just the first thing that came into my head. But yeah, we try to get to where we can help anybody that's out there, and the whole process basically it costs around $1,000 starting off, and then for like just a studio apartment, and then $100 per bedroom as you add a bedroom, and then if your house is larger, like we charge $100 extra for every 1,000 square feet beyond 2,500 square feet. So that's kind of the pricing structure. But what that includes is testing 6 of the different stressors that we test for, and then building a whole customized protocol for your house, and guiding you through that whole process, guiding your electricians and plumbers and anybody that needs to be involved in the process of fixing the problem, guiding them through that whole process. And then basically we'll be able to come back to your house and test all the solutions after they're put in place and make sure that everything's working the way that it should.
Wow, that sounds like a bargain, really, for all that you're doing. You're cleaning up someone's house and their health in the process. I like it. maybe for now we could end with sort of Brian's top 5 or however many come out of mitigating actions we can take right away to really get out of that danger zone, the ridiculousness of being, completely dirty and unaware of this stuff. Now we listen to this wonderful show and we want to make some changes. What would be on your priority list, your triage instructions for anybody to just get started down this path?
Yeah, well, an easy first step is to get that phone on airplane mode whenever you can, but especially at night when you don't need it. And if you need it, then turn the data off, and then you'll still be able to receive phone calls and texts, and it stops your phone from talking to the tower like 100 times per minute.
Oh, turn the data off. So what is that setting described as?
On an iPhone, it's cellular data.
Oh, okay, right, cellular data. So you just turn that off, and you're still able to get the emergency phone call. I talk about my sister all the time on the show, devoted listener, and she's on hospital duty to deliver babies, so she might get an important call. And if it's on airplane mode, that ain't good. For the rest of us, we can probably consider flipping over to airplane mode if we're not that important. But anyone can turn the data off and still receive an emergency call. Love it. Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not 100% foolproof with that. I mean, it's still going to check the tower every once in a while with that, but it definitely significant decrease in your exposure levels. So if you can do that, especially at night, that's great. Get the Wi-Fi off at night. All of these things are kind of minimal changes that you can make just to start. I like to also kind of have a disclaimer on this with people that, like, sometimes you're not going to notice it if you do some of these things as far as your health goes. Like, it's kind of like if you're celiac and you go low gluten, you start to cut out a bagel here and there, and yeah, that's great that you're doing that, and you might notice a little bit of a difference, or you're not as stressed or something like that. But if you're celiac, you don't really notice much until you cut everything out and then try to add it back in later. So, because your body builds up a tolerance to it, and once that tolerance is gone and you've kind of detoxed from that exposure, then you're able to kind of see how bad it was for you from the get-go. With EMF, it's a little bit different. There are some similarities, but it's not until you cut everything off, all the 6 different types of exposures that you have, that you really start to notice a huge difference. So just starting with the things like the Wi-Fi off at night, the airplane mode, unplugging things next to your bed, spending more time outside, not connected to your computer. Get a wired internet connection if you can. Those are things that can help you right away as some of the exposures that are closest to your body.
Is it better if I'm working on my laptop a lot? I'm typically trying to plug in to save the battery. Should I unplug to be on battery instead of the wire coming all the way to the screen?
Yeah, that's a really good strategy to do that.
Because then I'm not taking that current all the way to the machine. I'm working on a battery which is less offensive. I mean, the battery's emitting some radiation too, I suppose, but it's less offensive than the plug. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, unplugging the laptop, running off a battery is good. Your battery is DC. That's the same as the Earth. Oh. It's better. And then there's some other options that you can do. We didn't talk much about lighting, but
I know we got to do part 2 because the listeners don't realize this, but we're talking on Skype, and you're lit up in a beautiful red hue. The entire screen is all red because you got a red light blasting on your face. So tell us a tiny bit about that. But I'm making a wonderful list here of simple, easy things to do. But what about the red light?
So switching over to incandescent bulbs will give you a more full spectrum of light. But the other thing that we're concerned about that we test for in people's homes is the flickering of the lights. And so incandescents don't flicker as much as LEDs or fluorescents. So if you can switch out your fluorescent bulbs and your LED bulbs for as high a wattage as you can get incandescent bulbs, that's good. I'm going to be coming out with a lighting guide pretty soon here. And there's some LEDs that I've tested that are constant current, constant on LEDs where they don't flicker. and they have a better spectrum. So a lot of times we'll encourage there to be an environment where no flicker, and we have a full spectrum, and we have a combination between incandescents and LEDs that don't flicker.
But you're recommending getting the highest wattage possible of the incandescent, so that's cool, because Mia Moore was giving me a hard time if we're going to have this dark house, because I came back from Liver Kings and everything was on that orange hue and it was super mellow, but you can get some brightness, but just get the proper bulb and you're okay?
Yeah, so because your electricity is on 60 hertz, with the LED it turns on and off instantly 60 times per second. Really, it's 120 oscillations per second. So your brain can't perceive that, but your eye is constantly trying to adjust to that, and that stresses your hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal glands. So the incandescent bulbs, they heat up a filament. That filament doesn't cool down fast enough to turn completely off. And so the hotter the filament is, the higher the wattage, the less there is a flicker effect. So that's why I use these 250 watt incandescent bulbs. And I actually consulted with Sauna Space to create a fully shielded version of their sauna, and they have this photon light that doesn't emit any electric fields because of how I helped them design it. And then it's got a shielded cord and everything, and it's got the 250 watt incandescent bulb, so it's got very, very low flicker.
It doesn't necessarily have to be red. You can find a white bulb that's incandescent, high wattage.
Right. Yeah. The problem that people have with that is that there's not very many fixtures out there that will handle the higher wattage bulbs. So if you can find an older fixture, or you can get like a heat lamp fixture, those will work. Some restaurants, if you go to restaurant lighting, like websites, you can get like heat lamp fixtures that actually don't look that bad, and they can handle up to like 300 or 400 watts per fixture, and you can just put like 150 watt bulbs in there that you can get from. There's a company called Chromolux, and then there's some places on Amazon where you can still get 150 watt incandescent bulbs that are still pretty good.
So right now, this badass list says, at night, turn off your cellular data, or go to airplane mode, or at least turn off your cellular data. Turn the Wi-Fi off in your house. I like that idea of getting the remote unplugging device on the internet, where you push one button instead of yanking plugs out and crawling under your bed, because that's not going to happen.
Yep.
So we get the remote unplugging device and then unplug everything and plug it in at the touch of a button. I guess if I want my air filter deionizer white noise machine, I could plug that in further away from my head and be okay, get a Brian star for that.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, that would definitely be better.
So further away, the better, if we are plugging stuff in, keeping it plugged in.
Yeah, and if you need to charge your phone next to your bed because you use it as an alarm or whatever, I actually do that. I use my phone as an alarm. I get one of those power banks, those battery power banks, and so my phone's in airplane mode. I've got no Bluetooth, no Wi-Fi on, and then I plug it into a power bank to charge it on a DC battery at night, and then I can plug that back in during the day to charge the power bank if I need to.
Oh, okay, so it's like it's a charger bank that you just put the phone on?
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. It's a little power bank. Like I've got one that'll last like 7 charges, so I can just have it in the room and then I just charge it once a week. But
you're talking about a portable like a battery pack for the phone.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you're charging that at night. Okay, I have one in my travel bag in case of emergency. Now I can use that thing every night, then recharge it. Oh, love it. You got to do you got to put out like an ebook with or a shopping guide. I'll pay $15 for that right now, wouldn't you, listeners? Just get all the right stuff together. This is great. Okay, so the power bank. Continuing with the list there. Oh, get outside more, of course. Yeah, get the negative ions from the Earth's surface and the balancing all that indoor electricity. Try to find use the Ethernet and do wired internet instead of Wi-Fi when possible. The incandescent bulbs, we're going to try to find some 150 watt incandescent bulbs. Hopefully our fixtures will take them. And then the power bank charging at night. That's pure genius. It's so simple.
Yep. Those are some really easy things you can do to start to reduce your exposures. And then there's some supplemental things that you can do right away too, like molecular hydrogen actually helps reduce the damage. There's one study that shows up to 80% of the damage from EMF. It'll help mitigate that because it's a peroxynitrite scavenger. And then also raising your NAD levels is a good way to help combat these types of stressors as well.
So, what was the one you just mentioned? Is that like a supplement or?
Yeah, there's some NAD supplements. I believe
previous to that, what were you talking about before that?
Molecular hydrogen.
What's that?
That's a little tablet you can actually put in your water that creates these hydrogen bubbles. And I use one by Quicksilver Scientific called H2 Elite. I think Allergy Research also has one that they just came out with. There's going to be like a ton of these on the market here pretty soon.
Oh, yeah. Ben Greenfield talked about that on his show. I said, what's the latest, greatest hot health practice? He's like hydrogenized water. I guess that's what he called it. So this is the same thing where you're getting a burst of hydrogen when you're drinking your water. You can put a droplet into your glass of water, you're saying?
Yeah. You basically put a tablet in. It's kind of acts like an Alka-Seltzer tablet. You'll see the bubbles start to go up, and then you have to drink it all right away within a minute of them basically the bubbles or the tablet disappearing and the bubbles saturating your water.
And then what's happening when you ingest that quickly?
All those hydrogen bubbles kind of flood your bloodstream through your duodenum in the small intestine, and they start to scavenge all the peroxynitrite that's created. So it's mainly something that happens like right away, like within a snap. And so if you know you're going to have a big exposure, it's a lot of people will recommend to do it on a plane or when they're getting ready to drive. Take a chug a glass of hydrogen water right before you drive on a road trip or whatever. But if you know that you're going to be exposed to a lot of EMF, that's a good time to take it. And you can take it like 3 or 4 glasses a day.
And then the NAD you can get that in supplement form to try to increase your NAD levels.
Yeah. There's only really one company I've seen that has that, and it's a company called Elysium. And I'm not sure. I haven't even ordered it myself, but I've seen them, and they have some clinical studies that show it'll raise your NAD levels by like I think 30% or something like that.
Brian Hoyer, Shielded Healing. I'm getting pumped, man. I hope the listener's not getting overwhelmed. We did have a list that came out right at 10, so we'll put those in the show notes. And, oh, my goodness, pretty simple stuff to get started down this path. Maybe consider a home inspection someday. I'm totally down for that. And thanks for spending the time explaining this stuff. I know it got a little scientific, listeners, but we got to understand the background information here and then realize how direct the association is with something that stresses us at night. That's a bad deal.
Definitely. Yeah, thanks for having me, Brad. It's been a pleasure, and look forward to talking more and hearing like the feedback from your listeners.
Right. We got to do part 2 with just the light show and the blue light versus the new contraptions that we have now. I'm enjoying my Juve therapy and lots of research and support behind these concepts. You guys are really on the cutting edge. So keep going at shieldedhealing.com. Can we learn everything about you there? Is that the best place to go?
Yeah, that's the best place. We got a media page there, and then the store, we have some products in there. I just put our new shielding fabric up on the store so anybody can buy it now.
Oh, nice. Okay. Brian Hoyer, thanks a lot. Great show.
Yep, thanks.
Thank you for listening to the show. We would love your feedback at getoveryourselfpodcast@gmail.com. And we would also love if you could leave a rating and a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. I know it's a hassle. You have to go to desktop iTunes, click on the tab that says ratings and reviews, and then click to rate the show anywhere from 5 to 5 stars. And it really helps spread the word so more people can find the show and get over themselves, because they need to. Thanks for doing it.